Hi, good morning, everybody. Excuse me. Thanks for joining me this morning. We'll go ahead and get started here. If we got questions, looks like we just got one question to start out with. So get your questions posted on there and we'll get them answered. So Trent L says, I've been struggling recently with my ball starting straight or just left of the target and drawing further left. How can I get my face open more consistently so it starts a little right of the target and draws towards it? So sounds like you need to work on your face control a little bit. So what I actually do is work on some extremely open club face shots and alternate that with some extreme closed club face shot. And this is something that's called interleaving practice or variability training. And what it does is it helps you get an overall better feeling of where where square is, and it also helps you to be able to adjust when in the future if you become off a little bit. So tomorrow you may wake up and everything's starting way too far right, and you need to be able to make that adjustment to get the face closed. Well, if you know how to go to kind of both ends of the extreme, makes it a lot easier to make that adjustment. It also gives you a better overall awareness of where square is. So the way that you would do that, a couple tips. One, for opening the face, you can use a weaker grip. You don't have to. So by that, I mean taking your grip and putting your thumb more on top of the grip. That makes it a little bit easier to hold that face open through contact. In the downswing, try to feel like you aren't rolling the face over at all. So in the downswing, I try to feel like you're holding that face open through contact. So you're coming through contact and it's just being held open. That's not the reality of what's going to happen. But when you're doing these extreme right and left shots, you're trying to get the feeling of what it takes to really get that face opened up as you're coming through. The third piece is to feel like the palm of your hand, your trail hand here, is pointing up toward the sky as you're coming through. So if you do that, that goes along with holding the face open. As you're coming through contact, it makes it easier to hold that face open more if you have the feeling of the palm pointing up toward the sky as you're coming through. The last tip would be to feel like you're hitting the inside part of the golf ball. So if I'm looking down, if I grab a golf ball here, if I'm looking down at this golf ball, I'm trying to feel like I'm hitting the inside part. So this would be the very back of the ball. I'm trying to feel like I'm hitting the inside part. Because if I did, that face, in order to hit that inside part of the ball, that face has to be wide open, right? So the opposite is true for the closed face shots. So in the closed face shots, I try to take a stronger grip. So move your grip more on the outside. And this is optional. You can keep the same grip no matter what. But if you're having trouble getting that face closed, you may want to consider a stronger grip. But move that thumb more on the side of the grip. That makes it a little bit easier to get the club face closed. And the reason why I say that is if you think about what the positions you have to be in at impact. So if you have a really weak grip, so here I would be a really weak grip. There's a square club face. In order to get into contact with forward shaft lean, you can see the positions my hands have to be in. I have to have a bowed lead wrist and my trail wrist has to be bent back quite a bit to have forward shaft lean and a square club face. So you can see there, forward shaft lean and a square club face, bowed lead wrist and bent back trail wrist. That's a hard position for a lot of people to be in, especially amateurs, if you're used to kind of pushing through and you have early extension and things like that. So what makes it a little bit easier is if you have a little bit of a stronger grip. So if I have a stronger grip where I'm more on the side here, if I come into contact and I have forward shaft lean and wrist isn't bent back as much, my lead wrist actually probably appears to be cupped. It's actually pretty flat if you look at it from this angle, but it has the appearance of being cupped. It's just an easier position to be in. So to get that club face closed, it's just easier. So that's why I recommend a little bit of a stronger grip for most people because it just makes it easier. So that'd be number one. Number two would be feel like you are hooding this club in the backswing and in the downswing. So what that comprises of turning this handle. So with the lead wrist, you're doing this. The trail wrist, you're doing this. So that the club face is hooded down toward the ground. So I'm going to do that in the backswing. Now I'm going to do it even more in the downswing. I'm going to really try to get so that I can shoot that ball way left to start with. So that's number two. Number three is just the opposite from leaving the face open, where we talked about getting the palm pointed up to the sky. let's feel like as we're coming through contact, and if you're hooding that club as you're coming down, it's going to feel like it's very easy to have the palm of the hand pointing down toward the ground. So as you're coming through, you're going to feel like I'm closing this face and my palm of my hand's pointed down toward the ground here at that extreme. So alternate shots hitting really extreme right and extreme left shots. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you'll get a better overall feeling and awareness of your club face, and it makes it a lot easier to be able to control that. All right. So go ahead and get your questions posted on here. I see we got another question here from Walter. Walter says, I've been struggling with a bump my left hip and sliding through downswing rather than probably rotating my hips during downswing. Any swing thoughts or tips that can help correct this? Well, I need to see your swing to know exactly what's going on, but often a slide of the hips in the downswing is caused by a slide of the hips in the backswing. So if you ever heard for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you tend to do this in the backswing, you're going to tend to do this in the downswing. So I would try to make sure that you are rotating and pushing your hip back in the backswing. Basically, if you drew a line on the outside of your hip and the outside of your ankle here, you went and looked at a bunch of tour players on YouTube or something like that, you would see it. They never really go into that line. They just kind of going up to the top. So make sure that you're not sliding in the backswing. Use an app like V1 Golf or some sort of drawing app so you can see what's going on there, and make sure that you're not doing that. Now, the best way to fix any issue is to exaggerate the opposite. So if you are doing this in the backswing, I would actually literally try to get the feeling that your hips are going that way. So in the backswing, you're loading up, but as you are pushing into the ground, you're pushing your hip back this way, and that's going to help you also to get hip rotation. Because if you slide in the backswing, you're not rotating your hips very much. And if you restrict that, you're going to restrict your shoulder turn, and that's going to restrict your power. So I would try to feel like as you're going in the backswing that you're really pushing into the ground and pushing your hip backward toward the target. It's going to feel like, that you're bending over more as you're going up the top. So it's going to feel something like this. This is what's going to feel like. It's not the reality. It's going to feel something like this. So I'm loading up, I'm going up to the top, and I'm really pushing into the ground, pushing my hip back. And then in the downswing, I get that proper weight shift. Now is getting that proper weight shift. If you are going up to the top and you are just swinging your arms in front of your body, you're most likely just going to slide. And that may be what's going on as well. You may be loading up great, but then in the downswing, you don't get that proper weight shift and you just slide your hips and throw your arms in front. So we need to get that proper weight shift, push into the ground, and then rotate the body open as you're coming through impact. It could be that you're coming down steep. Again, these are all things I would need to see your swing to know what's going on. I'm just telling you what to look out for. So if you see you're loading up properly, you draw that line. It's not a slide in the backswing that's causing the slide in the downswing. You see that looks good, but you see that your arms are just kind of going in front of your body. Maybe you got a chicken wing going. You're kind of flipping the club. You're just bumping your hips forward and letting the arms swing out in front. You need to work on your weight shift and getting that to be much better. I'd recommend what's called the step drill. You can find that video very easily. All you have to do is search the word downswing on the website, and you will find it. So in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little search box there. You search the word downswing, you'll find a video that's called How to Start the Downswing. I think it's about the fourth one down in the search results. It's got some yellow lettering in the thumbnail, but Clay goes over the step drill in that video. Basically, what you're doing in that step drill is you're starting with your feet together, you're starting that swing, and you're starting that step. It's forcing you to get your momentum moving forward before you start that downswing. So that's what we're trying to do. If you're starting that momentum going forward after your arms have started down, it's too late. You're most likely just going to flip and you're going to slide your hips to try and get that low point in front of the ball. So that could be what's going on as well. Lastly, and these are all just things. There could be many other things that are happening. Like I said, it's hard for me to know without seeing your swing. But one other thing you can look for is steepness. So if you are coming down steep, you're typically going to just kind of thrust your hips and maybe even bump your hips to be able to get this club to come back down plane. So what I mean by steep is in the downswing that you could be doing there. So if that's the case, I'd recommend working on what's called the move course. The move course is going to get you to where you're shallowing out the club and squaring the face earlier so that you can stay in your posture and rotate through impact and get forward shaft lean. So that's going to be the move course. To get to the move course, click the house icon at the top of the page there. That's going to take you to the home page. If you scroll down on the home page, you'll see all the courses that we have on the website. There's 20 plus courses there. Click on the move and get started on that. But you'll need to check on video and see what's going on there. If you'd like me to see your swing and to know exactly what's going on to be able to tell you, I'd recommend joining my unlimited swing reviews. Right now, I do not have spots available, but if you join my waiting list, you will get an email. You'll be on a list of people that will get an email whenever I open up spots. So I can say, okay, this is exactly what you need to do. Do this, 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 and this, and you'll get rid of it. So that's what I recommend doing. But I give you 3 things to kind of look at. Number 1, sliding in the backswing. So if that's the case, exaggerate the opposite. And Walter says steepness is the problem. We'll focus on the move. Yeah. So the move also has many other benefits as well. Getting some forward shaft length compression being one of the big ones. So check that out. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. But yeah, go ahead and post your questions here, folks. I will be on here till another 45 minutes or so, till 10 a.m. Eastern time. So go ahead and post your questions, and we'll get started. In the meantime, I'll be checking my email here. So if you got questions, go ahead and post them on there. All right, so Melvin R says, is hitting a wedge much different from hitting an iron? Not really. It's pretty much the same. Taking a full swing with the wedge is going to be pretty much the same as your iron. I play a wedge just a little, like a ball back in my stance. The reason why I do that is it promotes a little bit steeper angle of attack, which helps you hit the ball just a little bit lower, and it helps you get a little bit more spin on the ball. And it makes it a little bit easier to control. I mean, you don't want to do that so much for irons because you don't want to put a ton of spin necessarily on the ball with irons. But with a wedge, for me, I like to do that because it helps add a little bit more spin. So that's why I like to do. The swing mechanics are pretty much the exact same. You're going to be doing the exact same stuff. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Alusigan. A says upper body slide at the start of my downswing. Need good drills, please. Also tend to chunk the ball. Could these relate? Yeah. So if you slide, you could release the club early, and that can cause you to hit some chunks. I'd recommend our compression line course. It's hard for me to know exactly without seeing your swing some of the things that may be going on. You may need to work on your stable fluid spine, make sure that you're in a good situation there. A lot of times I see that people get in this reverse spine angle at the top, and then they'll slide so that they can back away in the downswing. So I check that, make sure that that's not what's going on. You could be in this reverse spine angle. So ideally what we want to be in is we want to be angled away at address with our spine. So if we draw a line from our belt buckle up to basically the center of our sternum there's our spine angle at address. As we go up to the top, we want the overall angle of our torso to be basically the exact same. So that's what we would call stable. If you're going up to the top and you're kind of going like this, where you're leaning toward the target and you're kind of sliding toward the target, that could be the issue of what's going on there. So that would be the stable fluid spine course. If that's not what's going on, if you see that you're in a good spine angle, you're angled away, you're just doing this, then you need to work on your compression line and getting that to where it's all in a straight line. Because most likely at contact, you're probably like this. You're leaning forward. So what I'd recommend is working on the compression line if that's the case. To get to either one of those courses, click the house icon. That's going to take you to the home page. If you scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses there. I would check your spine angle on camera. You got to see what's going on camera. It sounds like you've looked and you see that you're sliding, or maybe it's something that you're feeling. I'm not sure. But I would take a look at that. If the chunking still persists, we also have a chunking and topping course. It could be that you're not loading up properly. It's really impossible for me to know exactly what's going on without seeing your swing. So I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall here in the most common things that I see. But stable fluid spine, you could be doing that. Compression line, you could be sliding way forward. Maybe you're angled away, but you're sliding way forward, and that's going to be bumping out your hip. Compression line. It could be that you're just kind of hanging back. You kind of have a reverse pill to increase forward shaft. So the move course is all about those two things: it's getting the club face squaring earlier. Getting the club shallowed out, getting that face squared earlier. So when you shallow it out, you can stay in your posture. You don't have to make any compensation in the downswing to get this club to be back down plane. And then you're squaring the club face earlier, getting into that position. So that's going to be the move course. That's what I'd recommend doing. To get to the move course, click the house icon. That's going to take you to the home page. The house icon at the top of the page there. That's going to take you to the home page. If you scroll down the home page, you'll see all the courses on the website. Click the move and get started. Can you get too much forward shaft lean? Absolutely. Typically, if you are releasing the club where we say, which is going to be about 45 degrees out in front, if you're not familiar with what the release is when we're talking about the release, and some other instructors or websites or whoever might have a different definition of what it is. But the way that we define it and define the straight line release after in contact. So you want that to happen about 45 degrees out in front. So if you look here, that would be the club splitting the forearms. If I choke up on this, you can kind of see where that club is splitting my forearms there. So if it's right there, that's after the release. That's before the release. That's the release right there. So if you're releasing that club 45 degrees out in front, that having forward shaft lean at contact, proper forward shaft lean at contact is a product of that. So you can see here, if I go super slow motion, I'm coming into contact. Here I got some good forward shaft lean. And then if I release that out in front, 45 degrees, that's a product of being there. If I release this club early, I don't have any forward shaft lean. So here I am coming into contact. I don't really have much forward shaft lean at all. And then my release is going to end up probably somewhere in there, maybe 10, 20 degrees out in front. So that's a product of an early release. So if you're releasing that club way too far out in front, it could be overdone. It could be that you don't have enough club head speed to support the amount of compression that you would be putting on the ball. It'd be hard to get the ball up in the air if that is the case. That could be what's going on. But you always want some forward shaft lean because you want to have the force leading the mass. If you don't have any forward shaft lean, it's going to be tough to be consistent. You can play good golf. You can absolutely play good golf. It's just going to be a little more difficult to be consistent. So, yeah, it's to each their own, but you can definitely overdo it, but it's pretty rare. I don't often see people who have too much forward shaft lean. It's usually, the lack of forward shaft lean that's the issue. But if you find that the ball is just coming out way too low, first of all, you need to be making center face contact because the ball coming out low can be because you're hitting it thin, low on the face, and that could be why you're hitting it low. But if you're making good, solid center of the face contact or even high on the face contact, and it's coming out really, really low, and you have no way of stopping the ball or anything like that, you may want to just try to hoist it up a little bit. Try to feel like you're more angled away as you're coming through to be able to get the ball more up in the air. Maybe play the ball a little bit further up in your stance. Just a couple little adjustments like that can make it so you can get the ball up in the air a lot easier. All right, so David W. says, fairways here are cut very short this time of year, and good cleat contact is tough with all shots. Anything to help with better contact? I'd rather be in the rough sometimes as they struggle with getting forward shaft lean. So here's a big reason why you want to get forward shaft lean is because if you release the club early, so you're coming in and it sounds like if you're struggling with shots on turf that is tightly mown, most likely you're flipping, because when you flip, you come in very, very shallow with the turf. So this club comes in very, very level with the turf, which means you can't hit down into the ball and get ball first contact. Basically, what you have to do in order to hit a perfect shot, or to be able to hit a shot decent at all, is to sweep it off the turf. You have to time that club hitting the ball in the turf perfectly at the same time. That's very difficult to do when you are flipping the club, because when you flip the club comes in very, very level with the turf. So you have to basically sweep it off the turf. So that's probably why you would rather be in the rough, because with the rough, you have a little bit to get underneath the ball. It's like it's being teed up. You can kind of launch it. You can actually hit up on the ball a little bit, which may be what you're doing. So what I'd recommend is working on getting some forward shaft lean, because here's a couple things about forward shaft lean. One, when you get forward shaft lean, you're typically going to hit down on the ball a little bit, which is going to help you get that ball first contact. The other thing that it's going to do is, if you watch here, if this is no forward shaft lean, so that's thin strike, right? Now if I get some forward shaft lean, look where that strike on the face goes. It goes much higher on the face. Now I'm making much more solid contact. So I'd recommend working through the move course to help you to get the club shallowing out, because most likely a lot of people flip because they're coming down steep. If you're already shallowing it out, then it's just the second part of the move, which is getting that club face to square earlier in the downswing. So that's turning this handle down so that you come into contact with a square club face and some forward shaft lean. So I'd recommend working on the move course. Again, to get to the move course, all you got to do is click the house icon at the top of the page, scroll down on the page, on that home page there, and that will take you to where you'll see all the courses. Click the move course to get started. But most likely, it sounds like you're flipping. You're coming in really shallow at contact, or maybe even hitting up on the ball a little bit. That makes it really, really difficult to make good contact on shots. If you ever wonder why tour players can hit out of divots perfectly and things like that, it's because they get forward shaft lean. They have the force leading the mass. They're able to hit down on the ball a little bit. Getting that forward shaft lean moves that strike higher on the face, so it's more solid instead of being on the bottom couple grooves if you're on like a real tight lie. All right, so Richard S says, can you take us through your backswing weight shift timing and start of the downswing, i.e. start, turn of the hips at what point? So Richard, good question. So in the backswing, you're starting that weight shift right away. So in the backswing, right away, I'm feeling like I'm feeling that weight on the inside of my foot. So as soon as I'm actually starting the backswing by feeling like I'm weighting, I'm putting pressure into my trail foot, the inside of my trail foot. And that's getting things going and pushing my hip back and out of the way. The very, very last part of the downswing, so the last little bit of the downswing, my momentum is going to start forward. My momentum is going to start forward a little bit. And you'll see this if you go to any tour player swing, you will see this. If you draw a line on the outside of their hip, their trail hip, and you watch as they get to that last little bit of their backswing, you're going to see they'll move off of that line a little bit. They won't ever cross into it, but you'll see they'll be on it pretty much all the way up to the top. And then that last little bit, you'll see they'll start to come off of it. So they're getting their momentum moving forward at the very last part of the backswing. And then as you're coming down, they're getting that. The reason why they're getting that momentum moving forward is so that they can get some pressure into that lead foot sooner. The sooner you can get pressure into that lead foot, the more you can start to use it to rotate the body. So your body doesn't really start rotating. It's like a split second before the arms come down. It's like a split second. Typically, a good checkpoint would be when lead arm is parallel back to the ground, the downswing. You'd like to have those hips back to square. That's typically a good position to be in. So you're up here, and then you are down here. That's typically a good checkpoint to be in. Obviously, everyone's going to be a little bit different because of body makeup, shorter swing, longer swing, so on and so forth. But that's a pretty good checkpoint for about everybody. So that's happening as you're going up the top. You're loading up. That's happening right away. The very, very last part of the backswing, I'm getting to my lead side. Just before my arms start to go down, my hips are going to start to rotate. It's like split seconds. If your arms are going down, you just want to feel like your hips rotating your hips starting to rotate, that's what's bringing the arms down. If you have that feeling in the beginning of the downswing, that's going to help you to get that sequencing right. So that's the feeling that you want to have, is that the hip, you're getting that pressure into the lead side, you're pushing into the ground. That's what's getting the hips going and getting the arms starting down. And then from there, you're going to continue to rotate and then fire the arms, the shoulders and everything, and the arms and the hands and the club as you're coming through them. That's the proper sequence that you want to have. The best way to work on this proper feeling is to work on the step drill. There's a great video. It's called How to Start the Downswing. I mentioned this earlier in the office hours. I'd recommend that video highly. To find that video, just go up the upper right-hand corner. There's a little search box there. Search just the word downswing. One word, downswing. Just search that word. And then when in the search results there, it's about the fourth one down, I believe, unless we've replaced it, unless it's got pushed down a little bit. But it should be about the fourth one down. The video is called How to Start the Downswing. It's got some yellow lettering in the thumbnail. Clay goes over the step drill in that video. So I highly recommend checking out that video to work on that drill. All right. And again, I apologize if I pronounced your name incorrectly. So Alusigan, I'm sure I'm doing that wrong, so I apologize. Says, thanks, Hugh. I'll continue to work on the TSG system. Another question. I've recently trained take divots. Now it seems the divots are too much. What is the right amount depth of divots to take? So that's a good question. Divots can really depend on the conditions. So if it's wet conditions, really, really soft conditions, you're going to take more of a divot in most circumstances. If it's very dry, firm conditions, you're going to take less of a divot. So always keep that in mind. You know, you may have just gone out on a day that was kind of wet and sloppy and super soft outside, and you were taking big divots because of that. That could have been what's going on. Also, the club that you're using will make a difference. So a wedge, you're going to take a bigger divot than you would with like a 4-iron because of the length of the club. So this is a 3-iron. Here's a 60-degree wedge. You can see the difference in the length of the club, right? A lot longer with that 3-iron. So because the club is longer, it creates a wider arc. So it comes in more shallow with the ball as you're coming into contact. And many times you actually play the ball a little bit further up in your stance to help get these shots up in the air a little bit easier. So even because of that, you'll be even coming in more shallow. So, and with a wedge, oftentimes, at least in my situation or my preference is to play the ball, one ball back for wedges. So I typically come down a little bit more steeply into wedges. So keep in mind the club, typically wedges, you're going to have deeper divots than with like a 3 wood. You know, unless it's super wet outside. In firm conditions, you probably won't make any kind of divot. So that's basically full size divot is basically like the ideal, but that's, you know, really, like I said, it depends on conditions. But typically you want to see like a dollar bill size divot somewhere in that area, nice and square. That's going to be the ideal. But if you are taking too much of a divot and you're basically kind of chopping down into the golf ball, it could be your compression line. So if you remember, the compression line is going to be the line that goes up from your lead ankle, lead hip, and lead shoulder at contact. We want that line to be roughly just a little bit angled away from the target. If you are too vertical or leaning toward the target, so here's a compression line, I'm leaning toward the target. You can see right here, with lead ankle, hip, and shoulder leaning toward the target contact, that's going to promote kind of a chopping down motion into the golf ball. You're going to get deeper divots when that happens. If you are in that kind of slightly angled away position, a couple degrees angled away, that's going to put you in more of a shallow divot position. So that's why I recommend checking it out. If you are chopping down, you're getting leaning forward, I recommend doing more of the compression line drills to get that to where it's better. To get to the compression line course, click the house icon at the top. That's going to take you to the home page. If you scroll down the home page, you'll see all the courses. Click the compression line course, but you want to move several inches back in the backswing, but I get better turn with this. Should I work on not going back too much? And what drills do you like? One drill I've tried in keeping my forehead on a wall and only moving back an inch so in the backswing through impact. So your head can move. Your head's going to move some. So typically if you look at a tour player, if you are keeping your head restricted and not allowing it to move at all, you're actually going to do yourself a detriment because one, you're going to see with most tour players, their heads move up and down quite a bit. Not a ton side to side in the backswing anyway. Not a ton side to side. So if your head moves, the main thing is having a nice stable spine. That's really the most important thing. So if your head moves just a little bit this way, but you have a nice stable spine and you're turning as you're going back, that is completely fine. In fact, I would recommend that you go on to V1 Golf app, download some tour model swings, and put a line on top of their head, draw a square around their head, and you'll see how much their head moves throughout the swing. It's not completely still. It may look like it is, but trust me, most tour players, their head is moving down and back in the backswing. So they're moving kind of down and back as they're going in the backswing. So down 1 to 3 inches typically, over 0 to 3 inches. That's typically what you're going to see, but you're going to see all of them with the stable spine throughout. You're going to see them, they're pushing their body and rotating like that. And then the downswing, you're going to see it's going to go the other way. So their head's typically going to move quite a bit forward. So in the downswing, their head's going to move quite a bit forward, and that's going to move down as well, about 1 to 3 inches from where it was at the top of the swing. And then overall, at contact, their head is a few inches forward and 4 to 6 inches down than they were at address. And then through contact, it stays there, and then it comes up into a full finish. So this idea that your head has to be completely still, that's a total myth. Look at the best players in the world. None of them have a head that's completely still. It's moving around inches. Now, if you are going like this and you're moving your head like a foot off the ball and then standing up, and if you're standing up, if you're going higher in the backswing, that is an issue because you're just going to have too much to compensate in the downswing to get down to the golf ball and be able to get some good compression on it. So if that is the issue, your head's moving up, then we need to feel like we're bending over more as we're going up the top. We're getting a steeper shoulder angle because when you stand up, your shoulders get level. So I try to feel like you're getting a steeper shoulder angle as you're going up the top, and that's going to allow you to talk about earlier in the office hours when someone asked, I can't remember exactly what they asked about. I think it was sliding. They said they were sliding down impact, and I talked about how often sliding in the downswing is caused by sliding in the backswing. So to me, it was probably doing something like this. So you want to do the same thing. Feel like when you are putting weight into that trail foot in the backswing, feel like that weight, you're using that to push into the ground and to push your hip back. So instead of doing this, you are actually doing that. You are pushing your hip back and out of the way. If you drew a line on the outside of your hip here, outside your hip down to your ankle, you should never cross into that line. Now your head may, as you turn, your body may go this way a little bit. Because you see here, if I'm like this at address and I go up to the top and I have a stable fluid spine, my head has moved this way a little bit, but my hip has not gone that way. I've turned my hip. So I wouldn't be I'd be worried about what your hips are doing. You don't want your hips to slide. You want them to turn. So I feel like you're turning your hip back toward the wall, almost as if you were standing up against the wall here. And as you're going back, you were pushing your hip toward a wall. When you slide the hips, when you go up to the top, you're going to have to stand up to stay balanced. Otherwise, you're going to fall over, right? So you push your hip back into that wall as you're going up to the top. And there's also a drill. It's called the wall drill on the website. You can check that out. Search the word wall, upper right-hand corner. Search the word wall. You can find that drill as well. But it's hard for me to say without seeing your swing exactly what's going on or what you need to be working on. But it sounds like to me, you're probably in fine shape, but I would check that hip. Make sure that you're not sliding the hip. That's really the most important thing. And that if you're sliding your hip, then your spine angle, because typically what happens if you slide your hips like this, my spine angle goes like that, right? It's leaning toward the target, which is not what we want. Now, sometimes we see people, they slide their hips and they're still angled away, and that's going to cause your head to move too much. So the head movement you're going to have some, but most of that is caused by either the spine getting off or the hips sliding too much in the backswing, and that's what you need to look at. So Melvin R says, I heard yesterday that it is okay for wedges to rust. Can you confirm or deny this? Yeah, that's completely fine for wedges to rust. In fact, when wedges rust, oftentimes it makes the surface rougher, so it makes it a little bit more grabby on the golf ball, and you can get a little bit more spin. That's why you see a lot of you know, wedges that are rusted on purpose, because it makes the surface more, you know, basically more coarse, more grabby, which can give you a little bit more spin. So yeah, it's completely fine for the wedges to rust. All right, so Ross J says, my thoughts on what has helped me shallow the club. From someone who played a lot of softball and tennis, it's very natural to start the swing with your arms, hands, or that's what it feels like. For me, this causes an over-the-top move, many times a slice. I've tried to shallow the club. I'm trying many thoughts, but have not been consistent until I tried this idea. After the backswing, I start the swing towards the ball with my right elbow. This brings the hands forward, right shoulder down, helps to start the hip turn, keeping me in posture and shallows the club. This might also be a help. Your thoughts on this? Yeah, it sounds like you're on the right track. So that whatever helps you to get the club to shallow out. I mean, a lot of what golf is just kind of trying things, guessing and checking, seeing what helps you to get the club shallowed out. That's what's that's really the main point. But you got to make sure that you're turning that handle as well. Because most of the time, if you're coming over the top, you're used to kind of holding this face open to be able to hit a straight shot. So if you do that when you're swinging from the inside, you're just going to hit a mile to the right. So you need to make sure that you're getting that handle turned down and getting that club face closed as you're coming through. That's the feeling that you're going to have as you're coming through there to get that ball to go straight. So yeah, sounds like you're on the right track, Ross, for sure. Thanks for sharing. So Chuck H says, can you talk more about ball placement with different clubs? So really, I try to keep it really, really simple with ball placement. Any shot, literally any shot that you hit off of the turf, you can play straight down from your lead ear. And this is assuming that you have good spine angle at address, so nice and angled away. If you're like this at address, you know, straight down from the lead ear, that's going to be too far forward in your stance. But if you have a nice angled away position, like we talked about in the system, 6 to 8 degrees angled away, straight down from the lead ear is going to be a little bit ahead of the middle of the stance. That's great for any shot off the turf. Driver, straight down from the lead shoulder is where that's going to be. And I like to say in relationship to the shoulders and not, I know you probably heard inside the lead foot. I don't like that because if you have a very narrow stance, that puts the ball too far back in your stance. And if you have a really wide stance, that puts the ball too far forward. If you keep it in relationship to your shoulder, it puts it about in the perfect place. And, you know, a ball forward or ball back of that, it's really whatever works the best for you, but that's a good general guideline. Now, as far as what I do, that's the super simple ball position. So it's just two ball positions, any shot off the turf, doesn't matter what club you're hitting, wedge, 7-iron, 3-wood, straight down from the lead ear, you're going to be able to hit some good shots from that position. And then with the driver, straight down from the shoulder. So two ball placement, if you want to keep it really, really simple, it's not going to make a huge difference if you put in this other caveat, which I'm about to say. So for other shots off the turf, what I like is that helps me get a little bit steeper angle attack. That helps me get a little bit more forward shaftly with my wedges, which allows me to drive the ball lower with a little. I'll play a ball forward of this lead ear straight down to the lead ear position. I'll play a little bit ball forward of that for any shot that I'm trying to further back in my stance as well. That helps me swing more from the inside. If I'm trying to hit a fade, I might play it a little bit more forward in my stance. That helps me to swing more out to in. So really it depends on the shot, but really you can keep it super simple just by remembering two. Straight down from the lead ear, shots off the turf, straight down from the lead shoulder with your driver. And again, you can adjust that for your own personal preference. All right. So, and if you would, I see we got some, I can't read this red on the, it's just you, if you wouldn't mind, don't change the color of the text because I just can't read it very well on here. So, all over the driver's surface, actually mostly low and towards the toe. But I hit also all other areas. Any drills on the website you can recommend to get the dispersion down and hit more often? Sweet pot. Thanks, Vern. Color. I read all of these, so you don't need to use a different color to make it stand out or anything. I read all of them. So if you would, it just makes it harder for me to see it. So if you're wanting to work on your strike location, I talked about interleaving practice or variable practice earlier. You want to do that with your strike location as well. So if you have a tendency, I think you mentioned, I believe it was low and on the toe. So if your tendency is to be way out here low on the toe, what I'd recommend doing is intentionally try to hit it high and toward the heel of the club. So more up here. So if I grab the driver, actually, so you can kind of see it on there. If I'm usually hitting the ball in this area right here, I'm going to adjust my feeling to move that strike closer to the center of the face. Now, if it doesn't, if I'm still hitting it low and toward the toe, and this is common because, if you've never tried anything like this before, because basically I'm asking you to intentionally try to hit a poor shot in order to hit a good shot. So if you've never done that before, it's going to be difficult. But you just need to exaggerate it more, get out of your comfort zone, and do that. So that's what I'd recommend. Feel like you're hitting it up here in the heel. If you actually hit it up here in the heel, then just ease off of that feeling. All that means is that you overdid it a little bit, and you can ease off of that. So that's why I would try to get that strike in the center of the face. Try to get that calibrated to where you're hitting it in the center of the face. Once you get a couple in a row where you get it in the center of the face, then what I'd recommend doing is actually trying to hit it in different parts of the face intentionally. So I would alternate hitting shots toward the toe, toward the heel, then in the center. And then I would just keep going through that. And what I would do is I would count how many attempts it takes me to hit it to get those. So I draw a line through the center of the face, where I just have an imaginary line through the center of the face. And I would use something like foot powder spray or impact tape or something like that. I prefer foot powder spray with the driver to see where you're striking on the face. That's going to be the easiest way to do it. But have that imaginary line through the center of the face. Toe strikes would be anything on the outer half of the face. Heel strikes would be anything on the inside part of the face. And then, you could say center strikes or any strikes that are in that kind of 1-inch area right in there. And I would alternate counting how many attempts it takes you. And I would try to beat your score every time. Once you get better at it, you can actually go around the world. Then I would go at low toe, try to hit it high heel, get a few in the center of the face. Once you get that, then alternate hitting shots on all over different parts of the face and count how many times it takes you and try to beat your score every time, just really focusing on club face control. So that's the best thing. A lot of people, when they struggle with strike locations, they're just kind of swinging at the ball. They're not actually thinking about where they're striking the ball in the club face. And once they do that, it changes everything. They're able to get the ball, have much more control over the center of the club face. So that's what I recommend doing. Try to adjust your feeling, get the desired result, and then do some variability training type practice, hitting it all over different parts of the face to give you an overall better awareness of the center of the face. All right. So Richard S. says, Q, can you discuss shoulders or scapulas? I found when chipping, I tend to raise my shoulder blades and club head. If I push my shoulders down, I seem to make better contact. So basically, you have protraction and retraction of the shoulders. So protraction is going to be of the shoulder blade moving away from the spine. Retraction is going to be moving toward the spine. So at address, you're really just going to be relaxed. You don't need to push your shoulders forward. That's kind of some unneeded tension there that I wouldn't really do. I would just be nice and relaxed and let your arms kind of swing. You don't really need to think about what you're doing with your shoulders as far as protraction and retraction. I would just let your shoulders relax and swing the club head and get the feeling of the weight of the club head working. If you are thinking too much internally, it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing. Is you're thinking too much internally, meaning I'm thinking about what I'm doing with my body and not what's going on at contact. So if you think about what's going on at contact externally, you're going to have more success. So just let the club head swing and base, whatever's going on at contact, then make an adjustment to that. So let's say you're hitting thin shots, that most likely means that you're flipping the club. So just make sure that you relax and you're keeping your body rotating open as you're coming through. Because if you flip the club, it's usually because, and it's hard to say without seeing your swing, but it's usually because you're not moving your hips. You're just kind of swinging your arms. So let the weight of the club head kind of release out in front, and you'll have a lot more success. Relax the shoulders. There's no reason to have any tension or to be trying to do this with the shoulders. It's just adding too much to it. But hey, if you're getting great results from it, then stick with it. But in my experience, usually people, when they try to kind of lock their body into something instead of have the freedom to move a little bit, it adds, it's thinking too much internally and doesn't focus enough on the external, which is going to be actually hitting the ball, which is the most important thing. All right. So Tim L says, I've been working with success. Lateral. What are the best drills and thoughts to make progress? It seems like having an increased awareness of the face of club at impact, open, close would be important. Absolutely. So at impact, there was what we call the big four. So you have your strike location, which I talked about a way you can practice that on Burns' question. So strike location is very, very important. Then we have our face angle, which is what you just mentioned. That's open, close face. I actually talked about that earlier in office hours as well, a way to be able to practice that. Basically just doing variability training. And then we have our club path, which is basically the direction that the club head is moving through impact. So that would be, when someone talks about in to out swing, out to in swing. And then we have our ground contact. So that's where we're coming down and striking the ground in relationship to the ball, or not striking the ground if you're hitting the driver, right? So these are all things that we work on in our ball striking masterclass, which is a course that we offer every month or two enrollment into. So I'd recommend, taking the course for sure. But if you're wanting some drills, I would recommend, watching this office hours afterwards. If you missed those, where I talked about the face awareness. So basically just hitting extreme shots to the right and alternating extreme shots to the right, extreme shots to the left, and getting an overall better feel for the face, and then getting a feel for your pass. So getting some extreme into out swings and some extreme out to in swings, and then putting those two together to hit draws and fades. So I'd alternate hitting draws and fades back and forth at a target. And then I would count how many it takes you to get successful reps. So let's say you've got to get 10 successful reps, 5 fades, 5 draws, and you're alternating. So if it takes you, and it has to land within a certain area of your target. So let's say it's a 15-yard wide green, which means that you would have to get it within 7.5 yards of your target. If not, then it's unsuccessful. Then you have to try again. And it has to be the desired ball flight that you want. So it has to be face draw so that you know that you're controlling your face and your path. So I would count how many it takes you to get all those successful shots. And now that's your score to beat. So let's say it took you 30 shots to get those 10 successful combined 5 draws, 5 fades to land within the target area with solid strike and to have the desired curvature on them. Then that's your number to beat. Next time you try to beat that, you try to beat. So it helps you to be a little bit more competitive. That also helps you to bring, a lot of people play much better, hit the ball much better on the range. And it's just because they're out there, they're in a groove, they're hitting the same shot over and over and over again. There's no you're doing on the range of the course because, one, you're putting pressure on yourself, at least a little bit, because you're trying to beat your score. And it works even better if you're practicing with a buddy. You're trying to beat each other's score. That makes it even better. So at that point, you're definitely translating. You're going to be able to translate that. And then you're also switching shots. So just like out on the course, you're not hitting the same 7-iron over and over and over and over again at a target. But on the range, that's what people do. And they wonder why they can't translate what they do on the range to the course, because you're not practicing the same way you are on the course. So if you alternate those, you hit different shots, you can get some much better results out on the course. So that's what I'd recommend doing. Alternate that. You can also do that with ground contact. You can hit a little bit in front of the ball, a little bit behind the ball. You can hit steeper divots, medium divots, really shallow divots, no divots. You can alternate hitting those kinds of shots and making sure that you're making solid contact on those and getting the different feelings of your body that have to make that happen. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, but that's what we do in the ball striking masterclass. That's just kind of a glimpse into the kind of drills that we're doing in there. But I will tell you, I'd highly recommend the course. I'm not sure when we're offering it next. It probably won't be till January, I would guess, and probably just to warmer weather folks. So if you live like in Michigan or something like that, you probably won't get offered it until. But yeah, it's a great course to be able to control these things. So that's what I'd recommend doing. But yeah, if you want to work on the easiest way to kind of think about it is just whatever the big four you want to work on. I would alternate between going from one extreme to the other and count how many shots it takes you to be successful. And then I would combine some of them. So strike location with face angle. I can combine that. You can come up with all kinds of different ways to do that. So Tim L says, sounds great. Thanks. I can really only find practice areas with mats. How can I play with divots on a mat? You can't. There really isn't a way to do that. You just base it on feel. So if you get more of a thud in the mat, that's going to be a deeper divot, right? And then if you get kind of a skimming of the mat, that's going to be a really shallow divot. So if you're working on divot depth, you can kind of do that on a mat by feel of what's going on, but you're not going to get the kind of feedback that you would on turf. Now, as far as ground contact as it pertains to where you're striking the ball in relation, or where you're striking the ground in relation to the ball, that's near impossible on a mat. I have heard of people doing is having a little bit of sand, and they just put a little bit of sand on the mat, and then they can clearly see where they're coming in. I've had people spray that, but and then they can see where they're striking the mat. So something you put on the mat to see where the club's striking it, that can be helpful. I haven't tried this training aid yet, but I stumbled upon it. I don't think it's there hasn't been a ton of marketing for it. But I think it did win like the training aid or invention of the year or something at last year's PGA show. But I think it's called AccuStrike. And basically it's if you've ever seen that material that when you brush it one way, it's one color, and then you brush it the other way, it's another color. Well, that's how this training aid works. Is that it's just a little mat that has some lines on it where you'd put the golf ball and you brush the material all in one direction. So that way, when the club comes down and hit it, you can clearly see where the club's coming down. That's something you could use. And I don't think it's real expensive. Like I said, I can't speak to the quality, but the concept of the training aid is fantastic. There aren't many. Most training aids are complete and total garbage. They don't really help you much at all. They're really just a waste of your money. You'd be better off paying for a lesson or getting a membership to Top Speed Golf or something like that. But this training aid, if as long as the quality is good, the concept of it is really, really good, and I really like it. It also shows you the direction that you're contacting them to see if they would send us one. But I don't know if anything's happened with that. But yeah, that seems like a really cool training aid. So yeah, Tim, check it out. If you do get one, let me know. Let me know how it is. We haven't gotten our hands on one yet, but I'm sure we will eventually. So we're about out of time here. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. So everybody have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks everybody.